All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea from Private Prep's marketing department. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us for this Thrive in 30 webinar, Time Management for Parents. We know that this year has been really challenging for families everywhere. And while our services are usually directed towards students, this webinar is dedicated to helping parents make the most of their limited time. We know how valuable that time is, especially these days, and we really appreciate you spending a bit of that with us here tonight. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we get started. First of all, we'll be recording this webinar and posting it tomorrow on our resources page. Second, I'll be monitoring the chat for any questions. I know that many of you submitted your questions ahead of time, which was great. We'll be answering those along the way. If questions come up, not to worry, we'll leave time for a little Q&A at the end. And finally, as there is a small workshop element to this discussion, please have a pen and piece of paper handy. In the interest of time management, I will hand things over immediately to Jenna Prada, our Director of Executive Functioning Services. Over to you, Jenna.
All right, thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everybody. As Chelsea said, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Funny, this is a Thrive in 30, and it is about time management, but I do want to give you guys a couple minutes for some of the workshop-y elements, and so it is possible that we'll run a few minutes over depending on how people are feeling about the amount of time I give you for your tasks. The other thing is, I know some of the questions that you submitted had to do with time management for children. That's certainly a thing that we are comfortable talking about here at Private Prep. But as Chelsea mentioned, tonight I'm going to be talking more about time management for us. I will say anything that I'm presenting as a tool or a strategy for us, if you think about kind of how can it be adjusted for children, I bet that's a thing you could do. And all of these ideas certainly hold true for anyone at any age, right? I'll just be using language that is more geared towards the life an adult is likely to lead. So with that in mind, we're going to talk today about a zero balance time budget, which will be where I ask you to do a little bit of workshopping. We'll then go from how do we take that zero balance time budget to building an ideal week, and what does it mean to have an idea of what your ideal week looks like. And then we'll talk about specific tools that you might use to support your time management and your organization. And then also just motivation for habit building. I know this is a big one for kids. I know also from talking to many of the coaches and the staff at Private Prep, and from my own lived experience, that it's hard for us sometimes to get motivated as well. So we'll just talk briefly about how we can leverage our own motivation. Beautiful. Okay, so the zero balance time budget. The idea is this. Many of us don't stop to think about kind of what are expectations for ourselves. Are those things reasonable? Do we have enough hours in the week to do what we're trying to do? And so the best place to start there is to actually take account of what we're doing, right? There are 168 hours in the week. And so whenever I work with anyone, including myself, to come up with, well, what am I going to do? I start with making a list of all the things I want to get done, broad categories, right? And think about how many hours in the week do I want to dedicate to that, right? And so in a minute, I'm going to ask you to sort of jot that down on, you can make a chart like the one we've got pictured here, or just a sheet of paper, left column, right column. In the left, here are the things I want to do. In the right, here are the number of hours I think it takes me to do them in a week. You can start now while I'm talking if you'd like, but I am going to keep talking to give a couple tips. One, don't forget kind of the basic things like sleeping and eating and showering, which do in fact take time. Don't forget also to just build in time for like the, oh my goodness, random things that come up. I know for me that ends up being, the forms I need to fill out for school or for sports that I didn't anticipate having to fill out for my kids. The email that came in that added 5 things to my list that I had no intention of doing this week. right? Sort of any of those, a doctor's appointment that I need to make. And as you are jotting down your own list, think about what else comes up in your life that is not necessarily something that you're thinking about getting done or prioritizing, but that just has to happen. Those are important things, right? As you go through all of this, in order to make sure you don't miss anything, think about the multiple roles that you hold, right? You're probably a parent if you're here. Perhaps you are a professional. Perhaps you consider yourself a community member, and that includes membership in different clubs or organizations or boards. Hopefully, you are also a healthy human that has time for things that are important to you or that just help you unwind, whether that's exercising or reading a book, or trying a new recipe, any of those things. So sort of go ahead and make your list and give your best guess at hours. If anyone comes up with a number then, right? So once you've got your whole list and all your hours, go ahead, grab your phone, grab a calculator or, some long form addition and come up with a total number of hours that you're demanding of yourself in a given week. If you get one of those numbers, I'd love to see you throw it in a chat. And I am going to be quiet for a whole minute while you work on your list. All right. That was a minute. I don't know if people wish they had more time or less time. If you have an opinion, throw it in the chat. I'd love to see. I'm going to click to the next side and keep going because maybe there's a lot of shy people here and that is fair as well. I'd love to hear from people how it went, but if people don't feel comfortable sharing, and by here, I mean see in the chat and I can call it out. But hopefully you got a number. Maybe that number is well above 168 and you realize now that in order to do everything you're demanding of yourself, you would need an extra 27 hours in the week. Or maybe it's below 168 and you've got reasonable expectations and you can decide, is there an area where you want to spend a bit more time because it's really something you're passionate about and you have the time, or are you just going to decide to keep some downtime in your week? And that would be fine too. Obviously, if you were one of the former people who had more hours of expectations than there in fact are, it's a good moment to just recognize that and think about where can you cut down. And that might mean there's going to be a couple areas where you have to lower your expectations. But doing it in this way, tied to actual numbers, is empowering and hopefully frees those of us who are overscheduled from some guilt, because there's a reality here to what is possible. And I know that during COVID, lots of us are, being the homeschool teacher or, working from home and flexing the hours and doing extra things that maybe we used to have help for because we don't have people coming to our home. And so there's just more to do, and really knowing that can allow us to make decisions about what really are our priorities, right? And what is realistic. If you found that as you were doing this, you had trouble estimating how many hours you needed for any given topic that you need to complete, the app Toggle, notice no E there, is fantastic for just actually tracking how you spend your time. I know I often do it at private prep. We flex our hours, we work when we want and when we can. When I started tracking the actual hours, realized I was working more than I intended to. So in the app, you can kind of set different projects and just hit start as you start them, and it'll give you a report daily and weekly. Again, super helpful. And so, assuming at some point you get to having your zero balance time budget where you sort of say, this is what I wish I were doing with my time, or what I'm going to attempt to do with my time. In theory, the next step is to lay that out in an ideal week. I'll talk in a minute about how to use the ideal week as a flexible set of inspirations, as opposed to something that stresses you out and it's another thing you're trying to do and we can't reach perfection in trying. Step one of creating an ideal week is your zero balance budget. Hard to say. Step two is going to be to sort of take what might be a really long list of activities and tasks and group it into fewer categories. Right? And so you might have categories like self-care that includes eating, sleeping, and basic hygiene. Or you might have, for fun, or just self is what I put on here, right? And so that's like pleasure reading, time with friends, maybe it's watching TV, or exercising maybe falls in there for you, right? And so as you think about your categories, you're going to want to make sure that you group things so that you've got a category that has no fewer than 10 hours in it, right? Because otherwise it can start to feel a little crazy when you take those categories and lay them out in your week, right? And obviously, once you start to lay things out in your week, you're going to start with anything that's not flexible. If you have work meetings that have to happen, or for me, I've got family time in the morning. I know that I have to get my children to the bus. I don't get to pick when the bus comes, and I need to be there. And so you want to start by laying those in, again, using your category names, and then you can build around that. Again, thinking about what's the ideal here? How would I like a week to look? I've got pinged here or highlighted free college schedule maker. That's a .com. I know it says college, and you all are not college students, but it makes a really nice, colorful schedule, and it's free. You can put your category names in where it asks for class names, and it works well. Obviously, this is one, right? At the top, I said lots of this we can shift for children. They would have different categories than we would have. They can use the same college schedule maker. The zero balance budget activity is phenomenal for students. I've never had anyone be close to right about the amount of time they spend on things. Toggle is great for them as well. But anyway, so you go to Free College Schedule Maker, or you do it in an Excel sheet or on a piece of paper, and you create that ideal week, which hopefully is inspiration, right? This is something that allows you to see, here's what I can do to accomplish everything that I've set out as a priority. And it also is empowering in that if something comes up, if you have an appointment that you didn't expect and that's falling during work time, you have a decision to make, right? Based on your priorities. Am I going to do this during work time and know I won't complete a work project this week? Or is work important enough that I'm going to swap that out to later at night and I'm going to, lose something else, right? But it allows us to see the decisions we're making when we don't follow the ideal week, right? And hopefully somewhere in your ideal week, you've got time to plan so that, if your first attempt at this isn't perfect, and it won't be, you can adjust. And with us, as well as with our children, we want to build in that time to adjust from the get-go, because it just acknowledges the reality of needing to adjust, right? And lots of people, adults and kids alike, feel like failures when I made this plan, I spent so much time on it, and I did it for a week, and oh my God, this one piece didn't work. Oh, that's fine, no problem. You've got time to adjust, go ahead and do it, right? Okay, so now we're getting into a couple tips about how to use the ideal week and what routines to build so that we are managing our time and our priorities well. One of these is kind of time management. And here, right, you've laid out a schedule, but some of this is also just building awareness of how long does any given task take, and how can I engage well in the blocks of time that I've laid out. So one of those is to identify your own attention span. Again, just referencing, because I know many of you asked about kids, this is huge for kids. The human attention span is between 15 and 30 minutes, right? So when we set out blocks that are 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours long, it is imperative that we think about how are we shifting activities across those blocks? How are we leveraging mini breaks within those blocks? Because otherwise we're just drastically having a negative impact on our efficiency across that time. You also want to think about in your schedule, kind of what are you doing with all these tiny tasks? For adults, those are things like, calling back, if they're going to drop off an appliance, calling back to schedule that, responding to the silly emails that come in throughout the day. That's just a, yes, I got that. No problem. Sure. Right. Sending out a bill that you might have to pay. Right. And so it can be helpful to think about grouping anything that takes less than 10 minutes into a block. I'm going to have an hour where I bang out all those tiny tasks. Similarly for kids, right? If we've got those assignments that are really short, can we get them done pretty quickly? This speaks to avoiding multitasking. Multitasking is not a thing that our brains can actually do, right? What we're doing then is just simply increasing the number of shifts that we make, right? Like if you think you're reading a book and listening to the conversation, really what you're doing is read, listen, read, listen, read, listen, read, listen. It's much more efficient to read for a bit and then listen. And so our scheduling and our thinking about how long things take should take that into account, right? Again, if you've ever worked on a project and you sort of say, oh my God, I spent hours and hours on it. Well, did you really? Or did you also take a call in the middle of that and get distracted by your phone and do something, right? So we want to be kind of relentless about focusing on one thing at a time. In your week, we talked about having time for the unexpected. Super, super important. Again, also important for our children to think about, when are we going to do that? How are we going to do that? And to just know what things tend to throw off your schedule so that you can take them into account. I do have here an image of the Pomodoro technique. If you haven't tried it, I think it's awesome sometimes. And it is a wonderful concept, right? And this is, again, going back to this idea of our attention span being 15 to 30 minutes. Pomodoros work like this. You're going to actually set a timer for 25 or some other number of minutes. And you're going to work during those minutes, right? You're not drinking water. You're not taking a bathroom break. You are working. And then you have another timer that goes for 5 minutes. And that is a break, right? And maybe you're walking around the house. You are drinking your water. You're doing whatever it is you want to do. And you do. So that cycle of 25 minutes of work, 5-minute break is called a Pomodoro. And the idea is you do 4 Pomodoros and then you take a 30-minute break. And it's nice because it just makes things feel more doable, right? Committing to 25 minutes of focus feels very different than I have a 4-hour something I need to finish, right? Or I have this really tedious thing that's going to take me a long time. So apply it as you will. And then in terms of routines, right? And again, I use this exact same slide when I present for kids, so it can easily work for children as well. I'm just going to use examples that are more geared towards adults. we want to think about in terms of our planning and our time and our prioritization of sort of two sets of routines, a daily set of routines and a weekly or monthly set of routines, right? And so I'm actually going to talk about the weekly, monthly first. I should reverse the slide, but I haven't. Weekly and monthly, we want to make sure we have time to reflect. What about how I'm managing my time or setting my priorities is working for me? You know, do I have enough time to do everything that the kids need? Do I have enough time to get my work done? Would it be better to shift the order of some things? You know, even just, do I feel healthy and good? How's my eating going? Whatever the things are that you need to reflect. And this is also a time to reach out for support. That might mean talk to your spouse about how you guys need to adjust the balance. It might mean reach out to a teacher about things you see going on at home as far as what's difficult for school that's causing stress in your home. You know, set up a time to talk with a friend, any of those things, and adjust, right? So that should be happening weekly or monthly or both, if you're a super duper planner. And then daily, we want to take a moment to look at the big picture. Um, and that means kind of what's coming up for me later. What's this whole day look like? Is there anything that I really need to make done? A lot of people talk about kind of identifying the top 3 on any given day. That leads nicely into having a daily to-do list, however you do that, whether you write it down or you keep an app. Todoist is a phenomenal app. It has a plugin for literally every digital space on the planet. You can share checklists. So again, for kids, if you have a to-do list app, a Todoist app, they could also have one, and you could have one that is shared. It's awesome. What's your actual schedule look like for the day? And also just having a morning and evening routine can really ground our day nicely. They don't need to be elaborate and crazy. You know, it can be as simple as you read a news digest in the morning, right? Quietly while you drink your coffee. And that is just the way that you ground your day, and you start with peace, maybe, depending on the news. It could be stretching at some point. It could be as a family sharing your highs and lows in the evening. Anything that adds kind of predictability is even more important now during COVID than it is generally in life, because so many of our other structures are torn down, that those routines, however small, are extremely meaningful, and do a lot to keep us mentally centered. Okie dokie. I do need to go faster. That's okay. Planning time, I am going to go fast through a couple of these, y'all, just as so that we can respect your time. I talked about having planning time every week. During that time, you want to check in on your goals for the various aspects of your life. For kids, that might mean various classes, right? Or sports and classes and friends. Update your calendar and your planner, right? Look ahead. Do I have a particularly busy day coming up where I've got meetings and, you know, it's a virtual day for the kids, and so I better like have a really easy meal to cook, or just plan to order in, or whatever it is. And just assess your professional, social, and personal health. How's everything going? Does anything need a little more love? If so, you can circle back to your ideal schedule for that week. As far as tools, if anyone is a planner person, I'm an executive functioning coach, so I'm a planner person. These ones are my favorite. I love Rote Runner. It's very easy to adjust for yourself. Clever Fox is one I recommend for both adults and kids, in terms of really breaking down having those routines and setting. This is one that makes space for the 3 priorities daily. And Panda Planner, if you are someone who is big into like growth mindset and affirmations, is fantastic. And then there's a couple other things here. I think what I'll do in the interest of time is, rather than talk about them all in lots of detail, I'll invite you to throw something in the chat if any of these tools spark your interest. And then when we get to the Q&A, I can talk about them a little more in depth. Okie dokie. And then a couple apps that I just want to shout out as extremely useful. Um, Timely is a very good one that asks you to have a to-do list, estimate how long each task will take, and then time yourself while you do those tasks. And so it's really good for just sort of checking in on, are your estimates good? Maybe you all are wonderful at this. I would bet your children are not. So if you have kids that are constantly procrastinating or behind the eight ball, or why are you doing that tonight? It might just be that they have no sense of how long things take, and Timely would be really helpful. We talked about Toggle, so that's that. Focus to do, I really like because it is a wonderful to-do app that also allows us to set up blocks on our phone. Helpful for me, probably helpful for you. In my experience also, if you have the conversation with kids about what prevents them from doing everything they want, they will say their phone. And children generally are more open to setting limits themselves than having parents do it, has been my experience. And tomatotimers.com, if you want to try the Pomodoro method, is a great spot to do that. All right. This is an inspirational quote. I think it's so true, right? I feel like a lot of things I just asked you to try are tough, but this is just a reminder of like, it's worth it. And finally, quickly, some thoughts on motivation. This equation, I think, is phenomenal. It really breaks down how motivation works in a way that is applicable kind of all the time and gives us tools to address our motivation. So you can see the equation there. In this case, expectancy is our expectation of being successful. If our expectancy is low, we kind of don't want to try. And so it's a good idea here to break down our task into smaller tasks, right? If it's smaller, maybe it's more doable. Maybe it's something as simple as like, I'm going to commit to just doing this for 15 minutes. I've got one that's going to be incredibly tedious that I don't want to do. I'm worried it's going to take me hours. I've been putting it off for months. I'm committed to 15 minutes on Friday just to see if it's as bad as I think, right? Probably won't be, and that'll be good. That'll increase my expectancy of success for next week. This is also a place where we ask for help to make things easier. If it's your child, right, you give them a tutor, you put them in touch with their teacher to ask questions, right? We get more information as adults. We research to understand. That'll increase our expectancy. We ask for training at work. Value also, if we don't think it's important, we don't tend to do it. So one of the great ways to address this, if you know why you have to do something and you're just not kind of feeling it, write down the reasons that it's important, and just moving those to the forefront of your mind can be incredibly helpful, right? Also, actually manipulating the incentives, right? Intrinsic motivation is fantastic, and sometimes it's just not enough, and that's okay, right? That might mean for some of us, if I finish this task, I get to eat the dessert I want or have the glass of wine I want. Maybe it's I have this movie that I've been really wanting to take the time to see in my house because it's COVID. And if I get done the project, you know what? I'm just going to do that tonight, even though it's a Wednesday. And so think about what are the rewards that we can manipulate. And that's different conversation with kids, but rewards are not bribes is the thing I'll say there. Impulsiveness, think of that as distraction. You want to limit distraction. So think about where you're working. Think about if you lock your phone. Think about if you do well with music, if you can shift your work time to a time where you are less likely to be interrupted by your children. What does all of that look like? And then delay. If we're doing something and the reward is months and months away, that can be hard. And so there again, we want to think about what's a more immediate reward. It is 8:34. I told you I might go over, but I don't want to go over more. I'm going to skip one slide. I apologize. This one talks about habits, as did the slide I just skipped, right? All big thing comes from small beginnings. The seed of every habit is a single tiny decision. And that's just a reminder that if you came here tonight being like, I do need to get my time under control, I really want to have a clearer set of priorities, you don't need to be there 100% tomorrow. It is fair game to say, just over the next few days, you're going to work on your zero balance budget. That's a small goal, and that'll help, right? Identify little things and consider habit stacking, right? If you want to build a morning routine just to ground yourself more, maybe you connect that to brushing your teeth, which is something you're doing daily, right? So just think about small steps, they add up. All right, not too bad. Any questions? I am good to hang out. Certainly, if you all are in a hurry to leave, you are not obligated to stay. I thank you again for joining us. Um, you can throw questions into the chat. Also, if you have questions that are related more closely to things you're seeing with your kids, we're going to send a follow-up email tomorrow that'll let you know how to get in touch with us more directly. And so you can certainly send those our way.
I'll just add on to that, I think what we'll do is also send out some EF resources. We have a really helpful hub that has a lot of the tips and tricks and tools that Jenna touched on, where you can kind of reach them pretty easily. So that'll be part of what we send out tomorrow. And just as a reminder, this webinar will be available tomorrow on our website, so definitely check back there. I guess we'll leave it for a couple seconds, see if we have any questions that pop up. But otherwise, thank you everyone for coming, for joining us, and thank you, Jenna. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Night, everybody. Thanks so much.